Today we travel to Cheshire, England, on a freezing winter afternoon in the suburban town of Culcheth. This is home to Linear Park, a peaceful, tree-lined trail where locals frequently come to stroll, walk their dogs, and enjoy quiet weekends. But within just a few short hours, on February 11th, 2023, this secluded area became the epicenter of a brutal assault that sent shockwaves across the United Kingdom. A 16-year-old girl lost her life with extreme cruelty. And what shocked the public even more was the identity of those responsible. In today's story, we will trace erased digital footprints, unpack secret text messages, expose systemic failures, and examine how malice can be invisibly programmed right inside a child's bedroom. A typical Saturday afternoon in Cheshire, northwest England. Linear Park is blanketed in the grey chill of mid-February. The ground is covered in dry leaves and frozen patches of mud. The air is dead silent, save for the faint rustle of wind through bare branches and the distant muffled hum of traffic from the highway. Every movement here is slow, until just before the 15th minute of the 3 p.m. hour. Brianna Ghey steps off the number 28 bus. The 16-year-old girl is wearing a thick hooded jacket, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders. Those around her remember her as a fragile soul, a schoolgirl who always kept her head down in crowds, someone who frequently hid behind her phone screen to escape severe social anxiety. Before entering the tree-lined path of the park, her fingers glide across the keyboard, sending a brief text to her mother.
I'm on the bus, by myself. I'm scared.
A vague anxiety. Written by a girl who rarely left home alone, but at the time, it was viewed as nothing more than the typical angst of a teenager. The bus kept its schedule. The suburban path remained peaceful under the fading afternoon light. At that age, it is completely normal for a child to text their mother when travelling alone, especially for a shy girl like Brianna. It sounds like a natural psychological reaction rather than an omen. Exactly. In the isolated context of that moment, the message triggered no alarms. It was read as a minor complaint or a fleeting moment of insecurity. The normalcy of everyday life is always the perfect shield for the horrors quietly taking shape underneath. 3:15 p.m. Witnesses Catherine and her husband stroll along their familiar path toward the secluded wooden stairs of the park. Ahead of them, on the grass near the edge of the woods, a dark mass lies motionless. Approaching closer, the winter dampness cannot mask the grim reality of the scene. Brianna Ghey lies there, her jacket heavily stained. A few yards away, two young figures cut through the brush, fleeing toward the main road. The emergency call is placed. First responders arrive within minutes, but all efforts succumb to reality. Brianna is pronounced deceased at the scene. The peace of Cheshire is officially shattered. When people hear about an afternoon attack in a public park, they immediately assume a botched robbery or a predatory stranger lurking in the shadows. A random, dangerous crime of opportunity.
That is the easiest theory to accept.
It protects our belief that our communities are safe and that danger only comes from individuals outside the system. But the forensic file opened that very night rejected this comfort. The examination revealed that Brianna was not the victim of a random mugging. On the body of the 16-year-old girl were 28 close-range physical trauma marks. They were ruthlessly concentrated on her head, neck, chest, and back, compromising vital points and puncturing her ribs. This was not the panicked reaction of a thief caught in the act. 28 impacts require physical endurance, sustained mechanical force, and an extreme psychological state. It was a calculated, Fatal targeting. 28 hours later. Simultaneous knocks echo at 2 ordinary homes not far from the crime scene. Cheshire police announce the apprehension of 2 suspects. They are not homeless drifters, nor do they have prior records. They are 2 15-year-old children, classmates of the victim. 1 male, 1 female. In the initial court records, they are referred to by 2 chilling aliases, Girl X and Boy Y.
Only 15 years old. Could there be a mistake? How can 2 teenagers with no history of severe aggression execute an act of such staggering brutality during a casual afternoon walk?
The public's shock at that moment mirrored the disbelief of the investigators. The justice system was preparing to face an uncomfortable reality. 2 15-year-old children walked into that park with hidden, offensive weapons in their pockets, and they did not act on impulse. When digital forensics recovered deleted data from Snapchat, the illusion of normalcy surrounding Girl X and Boy Y collapsed. What we saw on the surface was just a late winter afternoon. But underneath, a fatal project had been meticulously programmed, detail by detail, for months. A typical teenager's bedroom in Cheshire. On the desk are textbooks, a few makeup items, and colourful posters. But when detectives look inside a secret leather journal hidden beneath the bed of Scarlett, the girl known to the public then only as Girl X, that normalcy is instantly ripped away. Inside, the neat handwriting does not record school lessons. It meticulously profiles infamous historical offenders alongside a chilling title, Target List. The names of 5 children from their school are listed, complete with detailed notes on their habits, weaknesses, and how to eliminate them. Scarlett Blake did not operate this fantasy alone. She needed a physical instrument. Someone capable of turning ink on paper into reality. That person was Eddie Ratcliffe Boy Y. Eddie was a brooding teenage boy, a young kickboxer possessing considerable physical strength, but who suffered from severe autism and clinical selective mutism. In the real world, Eddie was isolated and struggled to communicate, but in the encrypted world of Snapchat, under Scarlett's charismatic and manipulative guidance, Eddie became a dedicated partner, an inquisitive accomplice, eager to experience what it felt like to permanently take a human life. At 15, eccentric kids often seek out extreme content online to rebel or impress their peers. Those aggressive texts, the target list. Are we sure this wasn't just a sick edgelord joke between 2 teenagers trying to shock each other? That is the narrative every parent wants to believe to protect the boundaries of childhood innocence. We reassure ourselves that words on social media are just harmless, vaporous thoughts. But the timeline of reality completely strips away the right to call it a joke. In November 2022, the first target was activated. A schoolboy named Eric. The digital footprint shows that Scarlett did not stop at casual chatting. She created a fake profile, spent weeks building trust, and lured Eric out late at night to a deserted location. Their plan was to harm him with a homemade incendiary device. The entire plot fell apart at the last second, only due to a factor beyond their control. Eric felt uneasy and blocked the fake account. The act was interrupted. But the intent never vanished. When one prey escapes the trap, the predator does not stop. They simply find another name to fill the void in the journal. If the plan with Eric was real, why did no one notice? The school, the parents, or the security filters of the messaging apps? How could a plot to build hazardous devices and hunt down students happen completely invisibly for months? because our systems are designed to see isolated fragments, not a pattern. Scarlett had a history of behavioural issues at her previous school, which led to her transfer to Birchwood. But when she transferred, the deep psychological profiles and warnings about her distorted aggressive tendencies were not thoroughly handed over to the new administration. The school believed she was just a student who needed a fresh start to integrate. In January 2023, Scarlett Blake walked through the doors of Birchwood School. And there, she spotted a shy transgender girl, desperately searching for a friend to hold on to. The name Brianna Ghey was officially written into the empty slot. Digital loneliness creates a very specific kind of vulnerability in this century. At Birchwood School's inclusion unit, Brianna Ghey found Scarlett Blake. For a girl suffering from social anxiety, Scarlett's active effort to befriend her felt like a lifeline. Brianna began to share her insecurities, completely unaware that every confession was being converted into analytical data in the secret chat room between Scarlett and Eddie. They began moving from hypothesis to clinical experimentation. Their first method of choice was not direct physical force, but a silent invasion of the victim's body. Harmful substances. One day, in mid-January 2023, Scarlett invited Brianna over to her house. There, she handed Brianna a large dose of over-the-counter medication disguised as something meant to create a chill, euphoric high. Driven by absolute trust in her new friend, Brianna swallowed them all. That night, at home, Brianna experienced a physical nightmare. Her digestive system was ravaged by the toxic intake. She writhed in agony, vomiting continuously, and texted her mother from her bedroom, crying out that her stomach felt like it was exploding. However, because it was a common painkiller, family and doctors diagnosed it as a routine illness or food poisoning. A teenager vomiting or having a stomachache happens every day. Even medical specialists need complex toxicology screens to suspect a medication overdose. How could her parents possibly suspect a classmate was doing something so malicious to their daughter during a normal hangout? Exactly. The sophistication of this method lies in how perfectly it hides behind mundane medical symptoms. The family's defense mechanism was neutralized because they had no reason to doubt. But what is truly terrifying is not the oblivious adults. It is the reaction of the children after witnessing their target survive. While Brianna lay on her sickbed, Eddie's Snapchat screen lit up with a message from Scarlett. "I'm giving her this medicine to see if she passes away, but she just got sick." Their reaction to this failure was not fear of exposure, nor was it a moral awakening. It was a technical disappointment. They viewed Brianna's body as a flawed biology lab experiment. The next plan was immediately discussed. Scarlett suggested buying highly corrosive chemicals from a local supermarket to slip into Brianna's milkshake during their next hangout. If Scarlett admitted to giving pills to a few other friends at school, why did that information never reach the principal's office? Surely a warning from a student could have triggered an internal investigation. Because in the school ecosystem, the line between a confession and snitching is incredibly fragile. The kids chose silence or dismissed it as edgy fiction to protect their social standing within their peer group. This silence unwittingly fed the perpetrator's confidence. But chemical substances were too slow, too unpredictable, and failed to provide the immediate visual feedback their aggressive obsession demanded. Their patience wore out. In early February 2023, the dialogue between the two 15-year-olds entered a new chapter. Clean and definitive. That method is not working. This Saturday, we will use a direct physical instrument. I will bring my offensive tool. Saturday, February 11th, 2023. The clock begins counting down the final hours of a targeting campaign calculated from a digital chat room down to the physical terrain. 11:25 a.m. Eddie's phone screen lights up with a text from Scarlett. Everything is ready. Today has to be the day. They finalise the plan. Checking the weapon in his jacket pocket, a heavy, tactical tool with a razor-sharp edge, an object that had no business belonging to a child heading out for a walk in the park. Meanwhile, at her home in Birchwood, Brianna Ghey begins getting ready to leave. Due to her severe agoraphobia and constant anxiety, she rarely travelled by public transit alone. But today, the deep desire to belong to a friend group, to be accepted by Scarlett, triumphed over her fear. At 12:45 p.m, Brianna steps out the door. She begins a complex and exhausting journey across multiple bus transfers. This itinerary was not her choice. It was designed entirely by Scarlett. The 15-year-old girl guided her friend through winding, low-traffic routes, deliberately avoiding the high-density security camera intersections of Culcheth. But why design such a convoluted route for a simple hangout? If it was just to go to the park, wouldn't guiding her friend through winding paths and multiple bus changes exhaust the victim and make her want to turn back? That is the core purpose of spatial manipulation. Forcing Brianna onto a long, complicated journey wasn't just to erase her travel trail from security cameras. It was a subtle psychological and physical wearing down. When an anxious girl is pushed far out of her comfort zone, navigating bus transfers in the biting cold, her natural defensive filters collapse. By the time she arrives, she feels nothing but immense relief at seeing a familiar face, completely surrendering herself to the guidance of those she trusted. At 1:41 p.m, while sitting on the number 28 bus heading toward Culcheth, Brianna sends her final text to her mother. "I'm on the bus by myself. I'm scared." Her mother's voice later recalled through tears she had replied with words of encouragement, telling her daughter she was incredibly brave and that everything would be fine. The family, once again, believed in the safety of a Saturday afternoon. At 1:53 p.m, the bus pulls to a stop in Culcheth. CCTV footage from a local convenience store captures the moment the trio meets. Scarlett greets her warmly, while Eddie stands a few paces back, brooding and silent. His jacket pocket bulges with a heavy metallic mass. They begin walking toward Linear Park, by this point being with two friends. Brianna's fear of traveling alone should have evaporated. Yet, according to records, she continued to text another close friend with an uneasy feeling. Why didn't she try to leave when her intuition was clearly flashing red? Her intuition was firing, but it was suffocated by her profound fear of isolation. At 2:30 p.m, deep inside the tree-lined path of the park, Brianna secretly texts her best friend, Amelia. "Scarlett is being so weird. She says she's pretending to text a dealer to buy illicit things." Brianna felt the suffocating atmosphere. She sensed the sketchiness of the two people beside her. But Scarlett had prepared a flawless cover story. She pretended they were meeting someone to buy substances to experiment with together. To a rebellious teenager. That behaviour is easily rationalised as a shared secret. Brianna didn't dare turn back because she was terrified of overreacting, terrified of ruining her relationship with the only friend who had reached out to her at her new school. She chose to keep walking, step by step, deeper into the blind spot of the park. 3:00 p.m. on February 11th. Three figures cross the final boundary of peripheral security cameras, entering the secluded wooden stairs area, completely hidden by the dense brush of Linear Park.
The surroundings are so quiet you can hear the crunch of footsteps on dry leaves, the wind whistling through the branches, and a soft cough from Scarlett. The ultimate trigger code is released before the most brutal moment strikes. Time has a tendency to freeze in harmless microsounds. The steady ticking of Eddie's wristwatch, the rustle of dry leaves underfoot as Brianna bends down to check what Scarlett claimed was there. The sound of breath turning to mist in the 3 degrees Celsius chill of the Cheshire afternoon. And then, Scarlett's soft cough echoes not from a winter cold, but the prearranged execution signal established in their Snapchat logs. The silence of the woods is violently torn apart. Eddie steps up from behind. The heavy offensive tool drives directly into Brianna's body. No warning, no negotiation. The first strike pierces the thick hooded jacket, inflicting critical trauma. Brianna collapses onto the grass, her eyes wide in absolute shock. But they give her no chance to comprehend what is happening. Continuous mechanical force rains down upon her. The two 15-year-olds alternate control of the instrument, unleashing a fury that lasts less than 5 minutes. 28 severe impacts. Forensics later record 8 strikes to the head and neck, 12 to the chest, fracturing her ribs and compromising vital internal areas. There must be a logical explanation for this frenzied overkill. If their original goal was to execute a perfect crime without leaving a trace, like in the journal, why was the actual execution so chaotic? 28 severe impacts. That looks like a spontaneous psychotic break, not a rational plan. That is a common confusion between the plan and the reality. Scarlett and Eddie spent months programming the script in digital space, but they had never prepared for the raw reality of physical human resistance. When the first plunge connected, the virtual world of Snapchat shattered, replaced by the raw panic of children facing a life-and-death boundary for the first time. They struck repeatedly, not out of sophistication, but out of a desperate panic to end the victim's life before anyone appeared. This brutality is the direct result of a digital illusion crashing head-on into physical reality. 3:13 p.m. The footsteps of a dog belonging to witness Catherine Weiss echo from the path. Scarlett and Eddie lock eyes with the incoming walkers. A few yards away, the witnesses are advancing. In a suffocating moment, Scarlett stands perfectly still, staring directly into the witness's eyes with a bizarre, uncanny calm, before she and Eddie turn and swiftly cut through the brush to escape. On the grass, Brianna Ghey lies gasping. Fading away from the critical physical trauma, by the time paramedics reach the secluded steps, it is too late. The 16-year-old girl passes away at the scene, taking her classmates' secrets into the earth. And immediately after, the police investigation swings into gear. With 2 eyewitnesses and a mountain of Snapchat messages left behind, the 2 suspects were apprehended within 28 hours. Justice moved incredibly fast. The legal system reacted swiftly. But the true terror lies in what happened inside those 2 homes during those 28 hours. Upon returning home, Eddie Ratcliffe calmly sat down to dinner with his family, cleaned his offensive tool with tissue paper, and Googled the specific criminal laws regarding juvenile offenders. And Scarlett Blakeshe casually posted a photo of Brianna on her social media, adding a caption expressing deep shock and grief for her dear best friend. That coldness was not a professional criminal cover-up strategy. It was a complete psychological detachment. For them, reality and social media had completely fused into a single plane, where the ending of a human life was simply content
waiting for a status update. The interrogation room of the Cheshire Police receives two 15-year-olds sitting across from detectives. But instead of bowing their heads in confession before undeniable evidence, a sinister new game of deception is activated. The trial at Manchester Crown Court in December 2023 did not carry the atmosphere of a routine arraignment. It looked like a public exhibition of psychological fracture, where two 15-year-old children, once bound together in a secret chat room, turned on each other like cornered animals to secure their last chance at survival. The Folie à Deux alliance completely evaporated. In its place was the ultimate defensive strategy: total shifting of blame. Scarlett Blake steps into the witness box with a calculated air of innocence. She admits to her dark fantasies, admits that the Target List journal and the intense Snapchat texts were written by her own hand, but she adamantly claims it was all a fictional role-playing game meant to sustain her friendship with Eddie. "I just wanted to look cool in front of him," Scarlett tells the jury. She insists that Eddie was the one who turned fantasy into reality, that Eddie alone inflicted those 28 traumatic marks in a spontaneous frenzy that she never intended or planned. Scarlett's defense sounds plausible when you look at Eddie's profile. He was a kickboxer with superior physical strength, and he had severe autism and selective mutism. An eccentric, uncommunicative boy like that could easily be triggered into acting out violently, alone, while Scarlett stood by, frozen in horror. It was a clever defense, playing directly into societal biases that individuals with autism are prone to uncontrollable behavior. Scarlett tried to weaponize Eddie's silence into an implicit confession, but the modern legal system does not operate on superficial psychological assumptions. When it was Eddie Ratcliffe's turn to strike back, the trial's deception reached a staggering new level. Due to his clinical selective mutism, Eddie could not give oral testimony in court. He communicated through a computer screen, utilizing pre-drafted texts from his holding cell, and through those cold, typed words, Eddie completely flipped Scarlett's chessboard. Eddie asserted he had zero motive to harm Brianna. He went to the park solely to help Scarlett meet someone, according to Eddie. It was Scarlett who took his tool. And it was Scarlett who lunged and targeted Brianna in a frenzied rage. The only reason Eddie had trace elements on his shoes and clothes was because he ran over to check Brianna's pulse after Scarlett finally stopped. Both are blaming the other for wielding the tool, and neither admits to delivering the strikes. In a secluded area with no direct security cameras like the wooden steps. Proving exactly who delivered the fatal blows seems impossible. Can a court convict when direct evidence is completely blurred by two mutually exclusive testimonies? This is precisely where modern forensic science and advanced legal logic shatter the hide-and-seek game of these juvenile offenders. Forensics completely dismantled Eddie's lie. The microscopic trace evidence found on the fabric of his clothing was projected via internal pressure patterns, meaning Eddie was legally required to be standing at extremely close range and at an active, aggressive angle when the event occurred, not merely bending over a body after the fact. More importantly, Justice Yip highlighted a structural truth under UK law. The concept of joint enterprise does not require the prosecution to pinpoint who held the instrument for the final impact. Scarlett planned the event, lured the victim, and gave the execution signal. Eddie brought the weapon, ambushed the target, and participated in the physical termination of life. This symbiosis is an inseparable, single, legal entity. Their desperate game of finger-pointing in the dock proved absolutely nothing about their innocence. It proved only one thing until the bitter end. These two 15-year-old children remained utterly devoid of empathy for the life of Brianna Ghey, consumed only with saving themselves through clumsy, transparent lies. On December 20th, 2023, the jury returned their verdict. Both were found guilty of the highest charge with absolute unanimity. But this judicial verdict did not close the book. It was merely the starting point for a grander horror, as the final privacy shields were lifted, forcing society to confront what is truly lurking behind the screens of our children's phones. Life sentences were handed down, but Courtroom 4 of Manchester Crown Court offered no sense of relief. The air was thick with a profound emptiness. Justice Yip adjusted her sentencing remarks, looking down at the two teenagers sitting motionless behind the reinforced glass dock. She made a historic ruling, lifting Section 45 of the Youth Justice and Criminal Evidence Act. The aliases Girl X and Boy Y officially ceased to exist. Their true identities were broadcast to the world. Scarlett Blake and Eddie Ratcliffe. The press was permitted to publish their 15-year-old faces. When the portraits of Scarlett and Eddie flooded the news feeds, the public did not see cinematic monsters. They saw two children with ordinary, innocent faces. The kind of kids who could be sitting next to anyone's son or daughter in any classroom. A deep chill settled over the nation, because this sentence did not patch the hole. It merely exposed a vast, dark space, operating completely outside the reach of the law. But regardless, the law fulfilled its ultimate duty. The two individuals were stripped of their freedom, and justice for Brianna was delivered behind the heavy walls of a maximum security facility. The case, from a judicial standpoint, is closed. That is the comfortable satisfaction of a legal process. We punish the physical bodies of Scarlett and Eddie, lock them away, and tell ourselves the danger is quarantined. But that is exactly where a systemic contradiction changes form. The digital forensics report from the Cheshire Police reveal the detail that cannot be ignored. Both Scarlett and Eddie spent an average of 8 to 10 hours a day inside private online communities dedicated to sharing unedited real-world violence and highly disturbing shock videos. The law can imprison the children, but the algorithms of big tech corporations, the very systems that day after day, hour after hour, sharpened their predatory instincts and amplified minor psychological deviations into real-world tragedies, remain completely unaccountable, continuing to generate billions in profit. A true accomplice in those locked bedrooms never stood trial. Technology and social media are ultimately neutral tools, much like any mechanical object. A child using them to consume dark content points to a failure in parenting, education, and supervision. We cannot blame an app for the actions of an individual. That argument sounds reasonable on the surface. An object is inanimate. It doesn't seek out a user's hand. But that is where the nature of modern AI algorithms completely changes the game. Unlike a passive tool, social media algorithms are actively engineered to maximize user attention at all costs. When Scarlett searched for a volatile keyword, the system did not sit idle. It automatically recommended and served up hundreds of progressively darker, more extreme videos to keep her eyes glued to the screen. This is algorithmic radicalization. Parents and schools are completely outmatched by an engineering apparatus designed to induce addiction and manipulate behavior inside a closed bedroom. Individual defense has collapsed under the weight of systems built to reshape human behavior, turning this into a public health crisis that transcends traditional parenting. I see the immense pressure. But big tech platforms always insist they have age verification protocols and safety filters for users under 16. They deny direct legal liability because they cannot control the real-world actions of autonomous individuals. And that denial is the core vulnerability. Big tech's defense mechanisms are nothing but paper walls against teenage curiosity. Outside the courthouse, Esther Ghey. Brianna's mother stepped up to the microphones. She did not call for hatred, nor did she demand extreme retribution. Her voice trembled but remained resolute as she directed public attention toward a much larger battle. The campaign for Brianna's law. The proposed legislation calls for a complete ban on the sale of smartphones to children under 16 and establishes direct criminal liability for tech executives whose platforms deliberately serve harmful content to minors. Because a haunting reality continues to unfold. Though Scarlett and Eddie are now isolated in separate facilities, the digital infrastructure and disturbing networks they inhabited still exist, still thrive, and still pull thousands of other teenagers into the exact same radical rabbit holes. Looking at the reality of it, enforcing digital ID verification to activate devices or putting tech executives in prison is an incredibly complex legal and operational challenge. I no longer believe this is just a parenting failure, after seeing the power of the algorithm. But can an administrative solution ever truly fix the psychological distortion of a child? The systemic failure we face is twofold: a total lack of proactive, regulated content curation by platform providers, and the absence of an integrated communication system between schools to track behavioural red flags when a student transfers. How do we redefine online child safety acts without turning them into generic censorship tools? If the ownership of the device and the filter of information entering a child's mind carries no legally enforceable accountability, are we not manually constructing the next tragic intersection if responsibility belongs to everyone, yet no specific entity is forced to act under penalty of law? Then does responsibility even exist? We want to hear your analysis and your solutions as protectors of the next generation. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The landscape of Linear Park fades completely into the dark of a late winter night. The tree-lined paths where Brianna took her final steps are now nothing but deep black silhouettes. The steady ticking of the clock abruptly cuts to silence. Against the pitch-black backdrop, the cold blue glows of smartphone screens begin to flicker across the dark like ambient ghosts. They do not turn off. They remain awake, waiting for the next vacant mind. Fade to black.